Retail and service workers, what's the best instant karma you've seen happen to a rude customer? Story 1. I worked at a telecom in Canada, thankfully, not anymore. A woman came in with a broken iPhone, demanding a new one for free. For context, in Canada, the iPhone 6s costs about $400 upfront on a 2-year contract with a minimum $80 monthly plan. She had a good plan, but still wanted it for free. She called our loyalty team in-store and spent the next 2 hours yelling at them. Finally, they agreed to a deal, and she got the phone for free. She looked at me and said she didn't want a case, and Apple Care was a scam. We work on commission, so this meant I was getting nothing, and my sales numbers were ruined. She kept telling me to hurry through the setup, while I was trying to transfer everything and get them out of the store. She grabbed the phone and marched off, calling me a terrible employee. 3 steps outside the store, she dropped the phone, shattering the screen and causing the white screen of death. She ran back in asking what I could do. I ignored and said, "Sorry, but Apple Care sure would have helped." Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I worked at an online banking help desk when an 18-year-old called, saying he noticed a transaction for £7 to allpay.net, and since he didn't recognize it, he accused the bank of stealing from him and called me a thieving little jerk. He then handed the phone to his dad, who defended his rude son and called me a pathetic scumbag for stealing £7 from a teenager. This, despite it being a debit card transaction, and me simply working in tech support for online banking. I called our debit card services to check further, and wow, they delivered. I then had the absolute pleasure of informing the father, "Hi sir, thanks for holding. I've spoken with our debit card team and now understand why your son didn't recognize the payee allpay.net. That name is used for discretion when someone subscribes to online adult content. That's what the payment was for. Your son has been paying for online adult content. Would you like me to tell him directly, or will you pass that on?" The father immediately said there was no need to investigate further, thanked me, and hung up. Story 3. A group of men came into my restaurant who were celebrating this rather large man's divorce. Needless to say, any female server in the building was about to have an uncomfortable visit. I kept an eye on their table but could not continue staring without it becoming obvious I was supervising them and not my staff. So, I ran to the kitchen to check up on the cooks. I was gone for maybe 15 seconds when a server came to get me to cut the recent divorcee off because he had just put his hand on one of the girls. Not cool, dude. I went out to the table to take their checks and ask them to leave. I told the table I had received a complaint from one of the staff and said there would be no more drinks served to them and that they needed to pay their tabs and leave. Now, I am not a small man, but the 6 of them could easily cause more than a ruckus. Once their glazed eyes realized what was happening and that they were not at a strip club, the divorcee shouted, "Oh yay, and what the hell are you going to do if we don't?" He started to stand up, but was a bit too large for his stomach to clear the lip of the table, and he spilled 2 full pitchers of beer and 6 almost empty glasses all over himself and his friends, as he slipped back into his chair with a thud. I did not have to say another word. His friend threw down $100, apologized, and dragged his beer-covered friend shamefully out the side door. Story 4. I've never put anything on Reddit before, but I couldn't resist this discussion. Guy was at the register in my store. I was the manager and began to berate my employee so angrily that I saw her starting to tear up. I walked over to see what was wrong. He said he wanted the 3 CDs he brought up to purchase for the same sale price that a rack of completely different CDs were priced. I told him he wasn't even on sale. He said he didn't care, he wanted the sale price. He then said he had ordered CDs from our store and always got the sale price. I asked him his name and realized he hadn't purchased the CDs he ordered, and we had been holding them for him for 2 months. He said he didn't want those CDs anymore, and he still wanted the regular priced CDs for a sale price. I had decided right then that I wasn't going to give this guy anything and told him so. Unfortunately, he said the magic words, "I want to speak to your boss." This meant I had to cave into his demands because our head office was on a "the customer is always right" campaign, and I knew that not only would the head office give in, they'd probably reprimand me and my employee for not treating him with full accommodation in the first place. I also knew he was the kind of person who would call the head office to complain. So, I chose to stay quiet and gave in. After he got his C.Ds, he looked at me triumphantly and said, "I always get what I want," and walked out. Fortunately, he forgot his wallet. I realized karma had called and I was to be its instrument. I picked up the wallet and threw it in the garbage, much to the shock of my employee. I didn't look in the wallet or take anything out of it. That wouldn't have been karmic. He came running back about an hour later, asking if we saw his wallet. I said I hadn't and asked the employee he had berated if she'd seen it. She said no, with an admirable amount of sincerity. He ran back out with a panic-stricken look on his face. My employee turned to me and said, "He kept calling me a bish. This is the best day at work I've ever had." I couldn't help but agree with her, and we both enjoyed the rest of the workday. Story 5. I used to work at Target. We were always instructed to ask parents to have their child sit down if they were standing in the cart for safety reasons. Most parents were totally fine with it. One woman, though, was definitely not. She was outside and had just put her child in the cart. At the entrance to the store, the ground had shifted slightly, creating a small lip you had to push the cart over. Of course, her child was standing right at the front of the cart. I politely warned her about the lip and suggested that her child should sit down, as there was a high risk he might fall out. She snapped at me, pointing her finger and saying, "Go f yourself. You can give me advice about my child when you become a parent yourself." All right, fair enough. I let it go. We weren't allowed to push the issue beyond a verbal warning. She pushed the cart toward the door, her child still standing, and sure enough, when they hit the lip, the child flipped out of the cart and landed face first on the floor. If you've ever seen the carpeting in the entrance area, you know it's basically a thin piece of fabric over concrete, no padding at all. The kid had a huge bump on his forehead and was bleeding heavily, likely from his nose too. I immediately informed my managers, and they made sure she got help for her child. Even then, she remained incredibly rude to all of us. Screw it. Told you so, bish. Story 6. It was about 3 years ago. An employee, we'll call him Dave, was working at my retail store when 2 customers walked in at about the same time, one black, one white. Dave was being trained on register after being there for only a month or so, with the manager standing behind him. The 2 customers got to the register at about the same time, but the black man beat him there. The black man then had the audacity to ask how good the product was before he bought it. And the white man behind him said, "Do I really have to wait for this nig to be done?" The black man was unfazed, but Dave said, "Sir, please don't use that kind of language or I am going to have to ask you to leave." White man said, "Oh, big man? You're gonna make me leave, big man? Because I called this nig a frigging nig?" Dave, who stood 6 feet 5 inches tall, replied, "Yes, I am a big man, and you have to leave now." White man challenged, "Come fight me then, big man. I will completely destroy you." Dave responded calmly, "All right, I will. Let me clock out and collect my belongings and I'll meet you outside." The white man looked a little surprised that he accepted. Dave turned to the manager and said, "Thank you so much for the opportunity, but I'm afraid I have to quit." The manager said, "Dave, I get it, but you don't have to do this." Dave replied, "Yes, I do." The white man was getting himself pumped up outside as Dave clocked out, grabbed his coat and his Pepsi, and walked outside where he sucker punched the white man in the cheekbone, sprawling him out onto the curb, and then he drove off. Story 7. I am a bartender server in a popular corporate bar and restaurant. I deal with a lot, but this was a particularly uncomfortable experience. A loser guy and his trashy girlfriend were rude the entire time. Initially, they would not make eye contact, and interrupted my greeting them by ordering 2 margaritas. They took up my table for 2 hours, ordered a large amount of food, drinks and dessert, all the while treating me poorly, eye-rolling, scoffing, generally being aggressive, sending back an appetizer, etc. I dropped off their check, hoping they would get the F out as soon as possible, honestly did not care if they tipped, and I certainly did not expect them to. They waited until I bussed another table and went back to the kitchen, wrote bad service and drew a dong on their check. Then walked out without paying. I discovered this about 3 minutes after they exited the building. By this time, it was 20 minutes to closing. I had no other tables, and to my absolute satisfaction, that D-bag left his keys and cell phone in the booth. I grabbed my manager, and we sat in the booth behind the one they had just left, knowing they would either call or have to come back in very shortly. Sure enough, they called. The manager answered and politely and enthusiastically told them to come right in. And when they did, I sat there holding the keys and cell phone with a big smile on my face, while my manager demanded payment for their $129 tab. A-holes. Story 8. I'm not sure if being a public defender counts as retail or service work, but since I provide criminal defense to indigent clients whose rights and freedom are at risk, I'll count it as service. I was representing a very troubled client who was a heavy meth user. She got high and brutally beat her 8-year-old daughter with a belt after the child accidentally broke her meth pipe. She was charged with child cruelty and meth possession, and because of her record, the district attorney's plea offer was 3 years in prison. My client didn't want to go to prison for getting what she deserved and started yelling at me when I told her that was the best offer available. It was either accept it or go to trial. I explained the overwhelming evidence against her: photos of her daughter's injuries, the bloody belt found in her bedroom, the broken meth pipe with residue, and the fact her daughter would testify at trial. After insulting me and calling me a public pretender, she fired me and somehow hired a private attorney for $8,000. I still don't know how she came up with that, but I have my guesses. The private attorney guaranteed he could win the case, and she chose to go to trial. Long story short, the private attorney clearly never read her file. The trial lasted about 3 hours. The jury deliberated for only 5 minutes, and the judge sentenced her to 10 years in prison. It was a good day. Story 9. This didn't happen with a disrespectful customer, but with a disrespectful coworker. I work in a store with 10 different checkout lines. 2 are express, 2 self-checkout, but only one of which has all the cigarette tobacco products in lockable glass cases behind it, meaning that if you want to buy that stuff, you either go through that line or you go through another line with a cashier, not self-checkout, and ask the cashier to go get you your cigarettes for you. At which point they go to the cigarette line, ask the cashier on it to get the smokes, or use their key to get them themselves in case the line isn't open. I have more than a few coworkers who smoke, and they have to buy their cigarettes the same way as customers do. Employees are not allowed to get out their own cigarettes and check them out themselves. They have to have another cashier ring them up for them. So, one day, early morning, I'm working the checkout with the tobacco behind it, and I notice this woman who works as a janitor stalker hovering around behind me near the cigarettes. I know she isn't supposed to be near there, so I ask her, "Can I help you with something?" She tells me that she just wants to get some smoke, and I'm like, "Okay, no, if you want cigarettes you have to get in line and buy some that way like everyone does." She gets pissed and asks me why I won't just let her get her own cigarettes, and I tell her again that I can sell her whatever she wants if she'll just get in line and pay for them. She huffs, rolls her eyes at me, and storms off. For the rest of the day, she totally has it out for me. Throughout the day, I have other cashiers telling me that she's talking crap about me in the break room left and right. My manager comes up to me and says that the woman made a complaint that I refused to sell her cigarettes because she's black. I go, "What the f?" and explain what actually happened and go on with my job. Then at one point there's a big lull in business, and I take a quick break, putting on my away light at the register and making sure to lock up the cigarette cases when I go, as is policy, so I can go to the bathroom. This woman comes out of nowhere and blocks the door, refuses to let me in, and shoves the handle end of her mop into my chest and tells me I'm not allowed to use the bathroom, and says something about how I think I'm so much better than her because I'm a cashier and she's a janitor. I'm like, "You realize there are security cameras right in this hallway, right?" And she jumps and takes off again, and I go pee. And this crap just carries on all day, and she gives me these nasty looks every time she comes by, which is often enough and more than usual that I think she's walking by my register just so she can glare at me. But the day ends, and I give my register to someone else and go home. Next day, first thing in the morning, as soon as I get in to work, another cashier informs me that the woman was fired late last night, because apparently she'd been caught on camera stealing a few packs of cigarettes out of the tobacco case, when the cashier who relieved me at the register eventually took a break herself but didn't lock the cases up. The cashier who didn't lock up got a warning but didn't lose her job. The moment she was caught stealing on camera and fired was the best part of all. Story 10. Working at the window at McDonald's late at night. A guy ordered something and pulled up to the window. I was cooking and managing the window, so I wasn't there when he arrived. When I walked up, I didn't see that he had trash in his lap. I opened the window to take his card or cash, and he threw a bag of trash at me. I stepped back, surprised, and watched him speed off. I was annoyed, but there wasn't much I could do. A few seconds later, I heard a bang metal on metal. I walked to the lobby and looked out the window. He had crashed into a police cruiser that was about to loop around for the drive-thru. Of course, I went out and told the officer what had just happened. Story 11. It wasn't a customer, it was the manager. She was terrible. She was disrespectful, deliberately picked favorites, and gave them gifts in front of everyone, even those who didn't like her, and tried to avoid her. She messed up schedules on purpose for people she disliked. Truly the worst manager ever. A huge storm was approaching, and people were seriously worried. The news urged everyone to stay home. Other businesses closed, and it was her decision whether to keep our store open or shut it down. Of course she kept it open. Because schools closed, only half of our scheduled employees showed up, the rest called in. She then called her favorites and told them they didn't have to come in. The 5 of us who showed up stood by the front windows with 0 customers in sight. When she started yelling at us, threatening to write us all up, we told her the work was done, and we were just watching the wind bend trees over, worried if we'd be safe or able to get home. Right then, we heard a super loud crashing noise. The industrial air conditioner on the roof got cleared out. It rolled across the roof and flew into the parking lot, landing directly on her car. It was so perfectly surreal. Dead center, completely crushing her car. If she had been inside, she might have died. This only happened because she parked right next to the building, where we were specifically told not to park. All our cars were in the farthest corner of the lot. We later learned her car was an outrageously expensive BMW, not fully paid off, and her insurance wouldn't cover the damage because it was an act of God. Story 12. I was working at a restaurant, and there was this family who were extremely trashy and did not look like they had a lot of money despite ordering a bunch of expensive steaks and drinking a bunch of drinks. They were unpleasant the whole time, treating me like I was their butler or servant. Then they asked for a manager to tell the manager that their steaks tasted rotten after they had finished eating and their drinks did not taste like they had any alcohol in them. Again finished, just trying to get free food. My manager noticed the way they were treating me and knew they were full of crap and refused to comp their meal like they were demanding. They began yelling and cussing at him and me and ended up trying to leave without paying, only to have their car not start in the parking lot, and my manager called the police, and one of them got arrested for disorderly conduct and possession of drugs, and the rest ended up walking after having their car towed. Story 13. This was partially my responsibility, but the overreaction made me lose all sympathy. I was an assistant manager at a paint store, a mid-size regional company, not a large national or international one. So we did not always have the best supplies or equipment. Sometimes we ran out of printed labels for the paint cans and could not order more. So we used markers to write the color numbers on the cans. It was a Saturday, and we were closing early to do inventory. I was younger and not feeling my best that day. An elderly gentleman, about 60 to 70 years old, came in with a paint can that had a color number written on it in marker. He wanted another gallon, and I said okay. But the last number was smudged, so we made an educated guess. I made the gallon, showed him the color, he said it looked good, paid, and left. Everything seemed fine to me. Hours later, we were closed and doing inventory. That same elderly gentleman drove back into the parking lot in his pickup truck and started knocking hard on the door. He could clearly see people were still inside, so my boss went to the door to see what was wrong. The gentleman was visibly frustrated that the color was incorrect. My boss let him in and agreed to replace the gallon just to solve the situation. He explained that we had to guess the number and were off by 1, so we would simply adjust and make a new one. The man seemed calmer for about 30 seconds until he saw me. He quickly came toward me and began speaking loudly and angrily about how irresponsible I was and how he believed I had done something dishonest. A 60-plus-year-old man, acting like a child. Another employee stepped in while I stood there surprised. My boss handed him the correct gallon and told him to please relax and leave. The man also spoke to my boss disrespectfully before leaving. He took the new gallon, threw it in the back of his pickup, closed the tailgate, and got into his truck. He accelerated the tires as he backed out and sped away. However, closing the tailgate had not secured it properly. As he drove off, the gallon of paint fell out of the truck. It caused a small mess, but we never saw him again. I am honestly glad he never got the paint he needed. Story 14. When I was 18, I worked the Saturday night graveyard shift at a Jack-in-the-Box in a crap heap part of town. One night, a group of D-head teens came through the drive-thru and ordered only water. It's free, it's a regular request. Our manager always made us give anyone and everyone free water, even if that's all they ordered. So, these kids pulled up to the window and the shift leader started handing out these free waters. When my shift leader handed them the last water, the D-head driver threw the cup of water right back through the open window and started to drive off. The shift leader grabbed the extra-large soda on the counter. It was for the car after theirs and threw it right at their car. It clipped the top edge of their open window and sprayed the inside of their car with Coke. Fast thinking and fantastic reflexes made for instant karma. Story 15. I work at an auto parts store. One guy stole some headlights worth $60 and literally sprinted out the door. We went outside to try and get his license plate, just in time to see him speed off, hit the edge, and cause his tire to burst. We called the police, and the man got arrested and had to get his car towed. Story 16. I was standing at the counter of the pizza place where I work when a woman stormed in and destroyed a pizza down in front of me. "This isn't the pizza I ordered. What the heck are you going to do about it?" she asked. I looked at the pizza, then at my buddy Nick, and turned back to her. "Nothing," I replied. She went on a long rant about how we'd be fired, how stupid and incompetent we were. She even said I must be mentally slow and demanded to know why we weren't doing anything. I said, because that pizza came from the shop across the street. She visibly shrank, turned red, and quietly slinked out looking so defeated that I almost felt bad, but I laughed so hard I had tears in my eyes as she left. Story 17. A guy came in acting like a complete mean. He refused to show identification to buy beer even though he looked no older than 20, constantly yelling and using foul language. He had also parked in a handicap spot without any tags or plates. One of my regular customers, a sheriff's deputy, was in the store and noticed the guy's behavior and illegal parking. The deputy went outside, grabbed his ticket book, and wrote the man a ticket. When the guy realized he wasn't getting his beer, he went outside, only to find he was being ticketed. I couldn't stop laughing. Story 18. I work in a warehouse where customers have to show a card to shop. Although we're not technically a grocery store, pets are not allowed. One man tried to power walk past the employee at the entrance holding a big pit bull puppy on a leash. We stopped him and told him he couldn't bring his dog inside, and he completely lost his temper. He's our best customer, coming 5 times a week, and even owns stock, but still, whatever. He demanded to know why dogs aren't allowed. We explained it's a food safety issue, especially with an untrained puppy. Our manager then came over and just waved him through, because no backbone and customers are always right. Less than 5 minutes later, the dog squatted in the middle of the main aisle and peed, then pooped. The man turned bright red, dragged his dog toward the exit, and abandoned his groceries. We politely asked him to please clean up after his pup. "That's the reason we don't allow them, sir," we told him. Story 19. I worked at Best Buy about 10 years ago, and this happened on Black Friday. Most customers were in bad moods after waiting for hours to get inside and stand in even more lines. But one woman was a challenging presence. After yelling at everyone in my department about how she absolutely needed the laptop on sale even though it was sold out, she claimed she would get the store shut down because she works with the city, knows the fire marshal, and said we had too many people inside. She actually called him, but we told her to leave, and nothing happened to the store. However, we reported her to the authorities as well, and she ended up getting fired for abuse of power. Story 20. I worked at a restaurant popular for brunch, And Mother's Day was probably our busiest day of the year. A customer called the evening before and asked for a table for 6, and was incredibly rude when I told him it was simply impossible. He got more and more worked up and asked to speak to my manager. At first, I didn't want to answer the phone. My manager wasn't the nicest guy, and we were in the middle of a busy dinner shift, but then he came up behind me and demanded to know why I had been on the phone so long. I thought, forget it, this customer isn't going to listen to me anyway, and handed the phone to Mac. Mac asked how he could help, listened for about 15 seconds, then told the guy, "So you're tying up my hostess in the middle of dinner, even though she's already nicely told you we can fit you and your entire family the night before our busiest day. Forget you, buddy," and hung up. Story 21. I used to return customer credit cards by setting them on the square podium used to swipe them, so the cards ended up right next to the customer when I swung the screen around for signatures. During a lunch rush at a takeout restaurant, one woman decided this was unacceptable and yelled at me for not handing the card directly to her. I foolishly tried to explain that I did this for every customer, which earned me a lengthy lecture about how she was the customer, and good service meant doing exactly what she wanted. There were about a dozen people eating at tables and 5 people in line behind her, so she was really putting on a show, making sure everyone saw her putting me in my place. Unfortunately for her, the performance proved too distracting, and she stormed out, leaving her infant behind. Everyone in the building noticed, since she had made herself the center of attention. One customer even had to run after her and stop her from driving away. For the record, there is no subtle way to pick up a full-size child carrier. The woman showed the whole restaurant that she valued her credit card more than her child, and then performed a walk of shame. Story 22. Way back when I used to be a retail worker, I worked at an electronics retailer still in business. Some guys were going around trying to steal DVDs. They were cutting the barcodes off to remove the sensors so they wouldn't set off alarms on their way out. Loss Prevention LP noticed and started sending floor reps to check on them, see if they needed help, etc. Finally, LP approached and handed them a shopping basket because they were carrying nothing, showing we knew what was going on. They started wandering around, ditching DVDs as they went. Every time they dropped one, an employee would grab it. They freaked out, dumped the rest, and bolted toward the door at full speed. No one chased them because they had abandoned all the merchandise. As they exited, one of them turned around and started flipping everyone off. While doing this, he stepped off the curb into the parking lot driveway and got hit by a car. It wasn't a heavy impact, just enough to knock him down, but he had to scramble to get back on his feet and keep running. Story 23. I work at a hotel's front desk. One day, we had an Armenian guest who complained that his room was not up to his standards and made a big fuss about it the next morning. He was so rude, he nearly made a coworker cry out of frustration because she refused to refund the night. His complaint seemed fake and invalid. When he realized he wasn't getting anything back, he threw his receipt on the floor and power-walked straight into a very clean glass door that had just been cleaned. His sunglasses broke, causing a small cut on the upper part of his nose. My coworker and I couldn't stop laughing the moment he stormed out, even more furious than before. Story 24. Let me start by saying I work near Baltimore. I manage a plus-size women's clothing store, which surprisingly gets quite a few non-traditional customers. Men who need a dress for a charity show, cross-dressers, gender-fluid people, transgender women, and drag queens. One day, a drag queen came in to pick up some shoes they ordered online. They were either coming from or going to a show because they were still in full makeup. I got their name, and during our conversation, another customer walked in. I greeted her and said, "I still be right with you." I went to the back room to find the order, which took a minute. On my way back, the new customer blocked me and said, "I said I'm a new customer and I've been here for 20 minutes and no one has spoken to me." I greeted her when she came in. She had only been there for about 5 minutes at that point. I was ready to apologize, but before I could, the drag queen stomped over, glared at the customer, and said, "Missed him, she already said hello to you," complete with bold finger snaps. The drag queen then made a big show of thanking me for getting her package and gave me a glittering touch of love on the cheek before leaving. The other customer paid for her Spanx sheepishly and avoided eye contact when I wished her a good day. Story 25. Once I saw a woman being really terrible to her kids. They were maybe 6 and 9, but she was shouting at them things I have never heard said to an adult and calling them names. They were both crying hysterically, just trying to eat their pizza. The only other table in the place was a trio of construction workers sitting behind them. I had asked the woman several times to calm down, but she would just say she wasn't hurting anyone, and basically to butt out. She would shout at me and throw a piece of chicken at me as I walked away. I called my manager up, but he didn't like to remove customers, so he wanted to wait and see if this continued. Then she hit one of the little girls on the back of the head. Before my manager or I could react, one of the construction workers walked over and he asked the mom to join him at the bar. I think she thought he was hitting on her because she was all smiles and flirty. As soon as she was away from the kids, he told her, "If I see you lay a finger on those kids again, I will do the same thing to you but 10 times worse. Have a nice evening." She immediately left, and they followed her to the door. I can only hope she learned something. Story 26. In the auto repair business, we must deal with a lot of passive aggressiveness from people displeased with having to shell out money for their cars. Once, a couple arrived to pick up a car which was parked in the first spot nearest the street. The husband was great and had approved the needed repairs in stride. The wife was a raging bitch, debating every line item of the estimate, asking pointless questions, demanding a cheaper price, threatening to take the car elsewhere or just get a new one. Anyway, the man made his way toward the office, but the woman made a beeline for the car, found the keys stashed inside, threw the plastic seat cover to the wind, then started it up and drove off before the bill had been paid, cutting the turn too sharp and scraping the entire passenger side of the car badly on the low concrete planter. I saw this happen. The husband never saw them again. Story 27. I used to work at a check cashing credit card cash withdrawal booth at a native casino. One guy was really drunk and being quite rude about how long it took me to get his cash, told me I needed to hurry up or he would make sure I lost my job. I did hurry, and I hurried through the balance on 5 credit cards as he kept coming back because he was having trouble at the craps table. I guess at some point during the night, Visa realized this person had spent about $10,000 at a casino in a matter of hours, so they put holds on every one of his cards, meaning the merchant has to take the card from the customer. I know this because I ran and kept every single last card he had on him, not happy at all. Another guy, who was also a drunk, had a limited interlock device license, used to come in all the time and act unpleasantly, taking it out on us if he was having a bad day at the tables. One night he came in with a taxi driver in tow. He was meaning to avoid paying the driver, but the driver just got out and followed him. He cashes a check and counts out what to give the driver, but is so drunk, he hands the driver the cash he meant to keep. The remainder of $500, probably about $450 to $475. The driver looked me in the eyes, and with my eyes I motioned for him to go. He turns around and walks away, and the drunk is none the wiser that night. A few nights later, and a little more sober, he comes again and asks how much he got out. I tell him and mention that he gave it to the driver. He is upset and asks why I let him. I say, "Well, you were really drunk and not treating him well. I just figured you were making it right by giving him cash. I guess that is fair. I need to quit drinking so much." He replies and walks away, and I never see him again. I hope he did get it together. Now to even it out. There was a guy who came in with his mom one day. He says that his dad was a really strict Christian and would never allow his mom to gamble. Now that dad died, he brought his mom to experience something new, takes out $200 and gives his mom $180 and says, "I love you, Mom. Now go have some fun." He then takes the $20 and puts it in this Wheel of Fortune game show's machine that sits right next to the booth. He pushes the button, and I hear it hit a jackpot. Guy won almost $20,000. He won $20,000 doing something kind for his mom. Story 28. Former cell phone industry worker. We have to pitch insurance and a case every time you get a new phone. We have to. You can actually be fired from some carriers for refusing to partake in making these suggestions. During a normal new line setup, this incredibly unpleasant woman is hostile about every part of the exchange. Her credit is absolute garbage, so she has to pay a large deposit, and more of the phone up front, and that's somehow my fault. Finalizing everything before she's completely rung up, I casually offer the same thing I do to literally everyone getting a new phone. Which insurance plan were you interested in, and what kinds of cases have you looked at? Apparently, that was the most offensive thing she'd ever heard in her life. She immediately raises her voice and makes it really uncomfortable for me, because apparently I'm only accusing her of being clumsy since she's black, and I didn't charge her white friend nearly as much, and I'm just being unfair, blah blah, super fun. I kept my composure and tried calmly explaining everything, even tried to let her know that I have to offer that to everyone, and I couldn't get anything across. Eventually, my coworker lets me know he's got this. We swap places and finish each other's sales. As she steps out of the store looking down at the Galaxy Note 3, she had just spent a total of $500-something to get. She trips, falls hard, and damages the screen. She comes back in asking for help after raising hell, and we all shrugged. Story 29. A former cell phone industry worker. I had a guy come in who was complaining about his phone doing weird things. It was able to make calls and send texts, but it had some quirks. Do not remember exactly what they were, but that is not important for the story. We checked over the phone and noticed the water damage indicator was tripped. When we informed him of this, he told us it was impossible and so on. So, he stormed out of the store all upset that we would not help a paying customer and he was going to call and file a complaint against our store. His truck was parked right outside the front door with the windows down. He decided to toss his phone through the window but missed and the screen completely and totally shattered. We lost our minds and were laughing, and he just picked his phone up, looked back into the store and just got into his car and drove away. I felt bad for the store he drove to afterwards that had to deal with him, but it was not my problem. Story 30. I was a cashier at a grocery store. This guy with a full cart complained and bullied employees until he was allowed to use my express checkout because he did not want to wait in the regular lines, and my line only had 2 people in it. As soon as my floor manager allowed him and he had his cart unloaded, a tiny old lady with a walker who could barely stand got in line behind him. Everyone gave him dirty looks. He realized he messed up and tried to make a joke about it. Dead silence. I hope his saved time was worth being an a-hole. Story 31. I worked in this fancy clothing store in this posh town at the seaside. It was a busy Saturday when suddenly a very pretentious girl walked in with her boyfriend, ignoring us as we greeted her, and even giving my colleague a demeaning look. She went on to browse around in the store and eventually took some clothes with her in the changing booth. After a while, I noticed a heated conversation arising from the booth between her and her boyfriend. I see the boyfriend running back and forth between the booth and some clothing racks, while me and my colleague were being chased away by her. She refused any help and did not leave the booth, as if we were a couple of Ebola patients. So, me and my colleague continued working and helping other customers. I was working the register when suddenly the girl turned up next to me, completely upset, and she started ranting about how our store strand really should work on the fitting of our clothes and how we were complete failures. I was completely caught off guard, and right when I wanted to ask her what the exact problem was, I saw my colleague looking at the girl while bursting out this horribly loud laugh, tears and all. What had happened was that the girl had taken with her a clothing piece she thought was a strapless dress. Well, it was not a dress, it was a skirt. The girl had tried on all sizes and got completely fed up, yelling at us and her boyfriend because the dress would not fit. So, she walked out in a crowded store making a scene with a skirt pulled up to her chest. I have to admit, after she left, I laughed till I was crying. Story 32. Back when I worked at a Blockbuster, we would occasionally deal with thieves. The standard was just to let them go, not endanger employees or customers. One time, this guy grabs some stuff and bolts. My manager runs after him and points him out to 2 police that had parked in our parking lot. They give chase. This guy dodges and weaves through people and traffic. He successfully crosses the street with police on foot. Desperate to lose them, he jumps down some stairs to gain a lead but breaks both legs. Story 33. I worked for a sushi bar for a few years. They do a half-price sushi hour most weekdays for dine-in customers. It's a good deal, especially for how high quality the food is. It was an especially busy day. People were waiting, etc. This woman and her daughter came in and stressed that they were in a hurry. My daughter has cheerleading but wanted the half price. Good luck, full house, but whatever. Customers equals money, yo. So the lady got upset when her food took longer than 15 minutes. She asked if she could get her food to go, which I then explained would make it full-priced. We got into a disagreement. She was getting upset and beginning to raise her voice at me in front of her embarrassed daughter while I was meekly standing there, unsure of what to do. Well, I ordered dine-in. You are asking to go. It doesn't matter if you were sitting at a table while asking. She was getting louder and more frustrating, and I was starting to panic. My anxiety was really bad at the time when suddenly my boss stepped in. And by stepping in, I mean she firmly and publicly defended me. You see, my old boss just happened to be working behind the sushi bar that summer. She told the woman to stop yelling at me and said if she wanted her half-price sushi, she would have to sit and wait like everyone else. The boss apologized to the other customers and made sure I was okay. The woman was shocked and now very embarrassed. Since the entire restaurant was now judging her, she quietly sat and waited for her sushi. The daughter apologized to me, and that table ended up leaving a good tip. My old boss is the nicest woman in the world. She still gives me free food whenever I go up for some sushi. She also has a bunch of regulars who she always makes time for. But do not make her angry, because she will become a scary, scary person in mere seconds. Story 34. I used to be a nighttime manager at a pizza place downtown. We were literally around the corner from a direct competitor. They had a carry-out window and offered that service all night. We did not and closed our doors at 10 o'clock and only offered delivery service after that. It is worth mentioning we were quite friendly with the local police department, and they frequently sat in our parking lot at night to complete paperwork, watch for drivers under the influence, etc. One night at about 11:30, I had a woman and a man start knocking forcefully on our door. I politely, but loudly, told them through the door that we closed carryout at 10. The woman lost her temper and started shouting and hitting the door while the man just stood there trying to appear intimidating. I asked another employee to keep an eye on me in case the situation became worse, and I stepped out another side door in order to actually speak with them. The woman was extremely upset at this point and continued to speak loudly. I let her finish and informed her that if she had called and placed an order, it was probably with our neighboring restaurant that had a carry-out window. She said, "I do not need to check. I know I called your store, and you took my order." I explained that there was absolutely no way I could have taken a carry-out order after we closed. At this point, the man stepped forward and used a very demanding tone with me, insisting that I let them in and give them their food. I clearly said no. He then pushed me, and I stumbled back about 3 feet. He attempted to hit me, missed, and I returned the motion and made contact, causing him to fall to the ground. At about the same time, the woman tried to approach me aggressively, and just then, we heard a sound and saw flashing blue lights behind them. This did not stop them from continuing, but the 2 uniformed officers who had just arrived intervened quickly. Another patrol car arrived. The 2 individuals were placed in handcuffs and seated in the vehicles. The officers were given a copy of the security footage. I asked one of the officers, out of curiosity, if he could ask the woman to share which phone number she called. He walked me over to her car and managed to get her to recite the number. She did so while glaring at me full of anger. "TS 7272, you foolish man." I calmly told her, "Our number is XX3030. We are Domino's. That number is for Papa John's. That is why 7272 spells out Papa." Story 35. I used to work at a Radio Shack in my area during college. It was never really busy on Sundays, so I was generally the only worker there. On this particular Sunday morning, I was incredibly tired from the night before, so I was kinda upset about having to come in on a day when no one was going to show up. I got even more annoyed when I pulled into the parking lot and was instantly greeted by a man who proceeded to start yelling at me. I put on my sales associate's smile and kindly asked what the problem was. "I've been waiting here for 30 minutes, and you are late." I wasn't late. I was actually 15 minutes early. He then followed closely behind me to the door and was screaming at me the whole way. "I'm never coming back to this store," and stuff like that. When I finally got the door open, I let him know that I had to turn the alarm off and count the register before I could help him. This also made him angry, but at this point, I didn't care. I was nice enough to try and help him 15 minutes before we opened. The least he could do was not be rude. Anyway, I finally get to help the guy out, and he wants to know about batteries. Cool, easy. I proceed to show him our batteries and their prices. He goes off. He started screaming and yelling about how everything was outrageous, and the prices were terrible, and apparently I had treated him like garbage. He started to pound his fist on the counter and started yelling again about how we didn't have any name brand batteries we did, and how Radio Shack was communist by trying to push their batteries on their customers. I calmly told him that there was nothing I could do, and asked if I could help him with anything else. He stormed off, punched a battery display, and proceeded to slam face first into our door. It turns out that since he was yelling and screaming at me while I was unlocking the doors, I forgot to unlock the other one. He quickly looked around to see if I had seen him. I just waved and told him to have a great day. He spun out of the parking lot, and I never saw him again. Story 36. I worked at Pier 1 Imports as a teenager, outside Birmingham, Alabama. This was about 20 years ago, and transgender folks weren't on my radar at all. Anyway, it's near Christmas. I'm at the register with a line of customers waiting. There's a woman huffing about something near the end of the line. By the time she gets up to pay, she's being very loud about the customer behind her. It's a man. It's a pervert in a dress. The person behind her was very obviously born a man, but was in fact wearing a dress. It didn't really faze me as much as this woman who was doing her best to shame this person, who looked very hurt and embarrassed, and this lady was doing it while buying Christmas decorations, no less. Anyway, she's trying to convince me how wrong and gross it is, how this person shouldn't be in the store, etc. As she's ranting, I ran her credit card, declined. I will try again, declined. I have rarely in my life experienced the satisfaction as I did at that moment, looking up at her, smiling, and saying that her card had been declined. Her face got red, and she really just went off. "That's impossible. Try it again. You're doing it wrong." At this point she has the whole store looking at her. I try again, and very loudly say it is in fact declined. She stormed out of there, knocking over a poor Santa statue by the door. Story 37. I work in a cell phones computer repair retail chain. We had this lady come in the other day. We'll call her Wanda. Now we do buy phones and other small electronics, but only if we're going to be able to sell them. We aren't going to buy your old unusable iPhone 4, and we sure are not giving you $600, no matter how new your device is. Wanda calls first, asking for quotes on 3 phones and a laptop. 2 of the phones are older and kind of useless. After a quick Google, the laptop is an old Compaq, which should tell you why I refused it. Wanda came into the store an hour later. Apparently, our other location in the next town had quoted her $50 for all 3 phones, and $150 for the damaged laptop. I knew this was false because the managers in that store are competent. I tell her I can give her $30 for the nicest phone, her personal phone, which will become relevant soon. I can take the 2 worn-out ones, and I absolutely will not be taking the old Compaq that runs slow with a chunk broken out of the side. She starts complaining about how I quoted her X amount of money, and how she can believe we can give her more, and we have to take these items and blah blah blah. Guys, it was 80 degrees in that store. Our AC had broken and we were hot, sweaty, and irritated, and Wanda just would not stop talking. I ended up giving her $50 for the phone. Seemingly satisfied, she left, saying she'd be going to the other store to sell her other 2 phones and the laptop. About 30 minutes later, she was back again, this time sharing a sob story to my coworker. He dealt with her the second time because I was close to snapping from frustration about needing money for her sick daughter. She argued with him too, until he finally bought the laptop for $10. Then, finally she was gone. Long story short, we checked the phone and laptop for resale quality. We found a text on the phone that said, "Give me back my laptop and all the things you stole from me, or the town police will be called." We also looked up her name and found that she'd been wanted for theft back in 2010 in our district. Cops were called, the owner was called, and the laptop was given safely back to him, though we did have to look him in the eye after accidentally finding his private video collection. Now this woman has an arrest warrant once more. Minor Saul thanks to two grouchy, hot 20-somethings who paid her $60 to get out and never come back. Story 38. I had a woman come into my bank one day years ago in mid-August and try to cash a check. Said check looked like it had been written by a 4-year-old. We went through the protocol as mandated by our organization, calling the issuer and verifying all data. While we were going through this procedure, the woman went off on a tantrum. She's ripping the little pens with chains from the little desks, throwing deposit slips around, demanding she speak to the president of the bank and verbally insulting all the employees. Likewise, she looks to have done enough speed to stay up for a week straight. We are finally able to get a hold of the issuer of the check. Lo and behold, it's a good check. We cash it. Thank her for her patience. As she's storming out cursing, 2 officers walk in and identify her as the owner of a car in the parking lot. Said car had a small child, no more than 2, locked inside the entire time. 20 minutes, in August. Some good people called the cops, broke out the window and rescued the kid and had that woman arrested. I hope to God that that little kid has found a new home or that its mom has cleaned up her act. Story 39. I used to sell mattresses, which no one really wants to buy. No one is excited about buying, they do it because they have to. I get it, everyone that works there gets it. One Saturday, this cranky old man comes in, and before anyone can greet him, he is complaining about literally everything. We are trying to help him, but he shoos anyone who approaches him away. Of course, then he turns around to complain about no one helping him. The man is old, like I said, and he cannot get around well. We recommend he not lie down on an all-foam mattress if he will not let anyone help him up. He says something impolite and blows us off. He hobbles over to a foam mattress, one that is right next to a wall. This wall also has a TV display sticking about 8 inches out from the wall, and it constantly plays advertisements. The man lies down on the bed and immediately dislikes it. He sits up and he realizes it will be difficult for a man in his condition to get off the bed, but he will not ask for help. He launches himself off the mattress and straight into the TV display. My manager laughs. The man tries to complain at us, but everyone else is too busy trying not to laugh, so he gives up and slowly walks out of the store. Story 40. I work at a music store that specializes in high-end band instruments, tubas, clarinets, trumpets, and the like. We only run sales for a couple of weeks each year, and this particular sale was nearing its end. An older man came in to look at trumpets. He spent a good few minutes studying the most expensive one we had on display. My coworker approached him and asked if he needed any help or wanted to try it out. The man started talking it down. It's nice, but I'm not really that impressed. $3,400? That's too much for that thing. Yes, right. At that exact moment, we got a phone call from someone asking for that same model trumpet, and they were ready to pay in full over the phone to reserve it. Normally, we'd have 3 or 4 of those in stock, but the sale had gone well, and the one he was criticizing was the last one we had. My other coworker quietly walked up behind him and took the trumpet off the wall. The older man suddenly flipped, started yelling, calling us incompetent, completely losing it. Turns out, he actually did want the trumpet. He had just been pretending not to, hoping to pressure us into dropping the price. But there was nothing we could do. The sale only applied to items we had in stock. He ended up placing a special order, which cost him a few $100s more. We talked about that incident for a long time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.